We've hit the official start time, but the join rate is still very high. We'll wait a couple of minutes until the join rate slows. Repeating as people are joining, please, if you can, share video, but remember the session is being recorded and will appear on YouTube. I like how the WebRTC implementation still have this behavior where they will queue a bunch of video and then play it back quickly to catch up when it gets behind. You see some Wile E. Coyote motions. All right, the join rate's beginning to slow. Again, as you join, if you're able and willing, please share video. We like this to be as close to a meeting around a table as we can make it. We aren't using any queuing features unless we need to. We very seldom need to in this meeting. If you've got something to say, just open your mic and start talking. This session is being recorded. It will appear on YouTube. The agenda and the beginning of notes are at the notes page. I might have failed to link it from the data tracker meeting page. We still have that feature that we need to implement in the data tracker to use a notes page that doesn't follow the normal schema. But we've got a very long history of naming the pages for these meetings the way this one is currently named. The link to the notes is in the chat in Zulip. If anyone's having trouble getting to the notes, ask in the chat and other participants will help you. Remember that you can use the outline, just hitting expand all on the right to see an outline of the notes. That is a nice way to look at the full agenda in very brief form. Does anyone have any bashes for the agenda today? Any additions? Any reordering? All right. I'll start out with a new section that we're going to expand on going into future meetings. One of the pieces of feedback that we've gotten is that it's hard to know what all of the detailed sections that we've been talking to each month, how they fit into the overall picture of how we are changing all of the systems. So we're going to start the meeting each time pointing to the bigger picture of what we're working on at the moment. This is an early effort. I think we'll probably try to provide something richer for the future meetings, but this is a start. So what we are working on at the moment, what we've been working on since the last tools call, is primarily the RPC Production Center's modernization tasks. The workflow management system, which we have named Purple internally, the RFC editor website rewrite, which we've named Red, and the editor that the RPC will be using going forward when working on changing drafts into RSCs, and that's called DraftForge. You can find those things under those names under the IETF tools GitHub organization as repositories. As noted here, this, along with many, many other things, were delayed as we were pushing through the heavy part of the infrastructure transition in 2024. This one's the priority to work on right now because it must complete before we reach RSC 10K. In parallel with this, we're finishing the work on moving the data tracker to use blob storage as the way it keeps its the artifacts like drafts and RFCs and conflict reviews and all of these other things, and serves them both to improve its resiliency and its performance. The way that we serve those artifacts will make the data tracker's susceptibility to denial of service from intentional or unintentional heavy bot traffic much easier to I lost track of where I put the front of that sentence. It'll make it much easier to make the data tracker remain performant when such bots show up. We've also started the move that we mentioned last month of the production services into Azure. The point of making this change at this time is to get to more performant hardware and to move into an environment where we have more control over when the systems update themselves. We've started picking up other highly delayed projects like the series of issues that the ISG has asked us to focus on, and on the IAB liaison management tool. There's a little bit of detail in the notes as we go further down. There's been focus on stabilizing the mail system, working on cleaning up some basic delivery issues, and then preparing the system, changing how we interact with that system so that it will be more manageable going forward, and we'll have a better path for moving it into a more modern operating system and possibly changing its architecture as we had discussed long ago. And then we have small projects that are finishing up, like the IDNITS rewrite. So we'll start talking about the details of those and the hot topics for discussion. But does anyone have any questions or feedback about just the general big picture and where we're putting our focus? All right, not hearing anything. So our first hot topic is on the changes to the mail processing. We did have an issue back in April where our TLSA record and our certificates got out of sync for a few hours. Was corrected rapidly, but we did have to, we discovered this through community notification instead of automation, and we have since put automation in place that will tell us if these things get out of sync. That's running. The project that we created to do this monitoring is receiving significant attention. We have several people from outside the community that have opened issues that have asked for improvements so that they can use it in their environments. Apparently it's scratching an itch that the world needed. We're also talking about making some changes in the automation for deploying the certificates to ensure that the TLSA records are created correctly before they are deployed and the certs are deployed. So not just monitoring after the fact, but during the transition as well. Dane Foster, who's on the call with New Machine Futures, has added some text about some of the changes that have been made directly on Mail 2. Dane, do you want to speak to those briefly?
Morning, everyone. Apologies, I've got one screen as I'm working from the sofa, given it's 6 o'clock in the morning here in New Zealand. So I had to kind of do this. We've got essentially some Ansible code to reproduce the mail system as it is, which doesn't sound that exciting, but it lets us do essentially some testing and config modeling to really change the way the mail system is done and move different parts to different systems. As Robert said, you know, we want to change how it's architected, and that Ansible code lets us do that in a reproducible, testable way, so we can ensure we're not going to break that configuration. So that's probably the biggest one, unless you meant something else, Robert.
No, that's exactly what I was looking for.
And the intention there, I think, as well, is to make that public. It's not at the moment because it does contain some somewhat sensitive data, but the skeleton of that should be made public when we're ready to, and that will include the full sort of IETF architecture mail system, so that anybody could, in theory, reproduce and test that themselves.
Awesome, thank you. So there are also some details and some links about changes that we're making to the way that delivery is implemented. Unless somebody has questions about the mail service, I'll move on. So we've made a selection for the cybersecurity services RFP. The contract work on that is, I believe, complete, but not yet announced. As soon as Jay has an opportunity, the announcement will go out. We expect the work to begin on this just after the Madrid IETF meeting. This was the time that firm has the resources to do the 2 projects. If you remember from that RFP, the projects are assessing the data tracker in its current posture and looking at our new cloud infrastructure to make sure that we're not blind to any security issues that we may have in the way that we set that up over the last year. Jennifer, do you want to talk about the next section?
Sure. So the next section is sort of early announcement that we're planning. It's related to the security work to begin enforcing password strength requirements on data tracker users. This is something that we should be doing but haven't. The way that we're going to roll this out is by allowing people who have insecure passwords when they log in. That's the only time we actually hold on to their plain text. So if that doesn't meet the requirements that we land on, we haven't finalized exactly what those are going to be yet. They will be prompted to do a password reset before they can log in successfully. So I guess we want to, we're planning to try to be noisy about the fact that this is coming because, I'm sure someone will get caught being forced to go through a password reset cycle, which involves catching an email and clicking on links. So we're hoping to surprise as few people as possible with that. Is something we're aware of. And as I mentioned, we're still working on what the requirements are going to be exactly in detail. We're hoping to make it easy for people, not to be too annoying, and to make the interface clear so that you can select a password that will comply on your first try, and make it compatible with the sets of random characters that generators allow you to select. And I think that we've discussed that for a long time there has been a widget on the password change form that estimates how difficult to crack it is. We may try to incorporate that, but if people have suggestions on how to make this whole process less annoying, that would be great. I guess one other piece is that people who have not logged in for a very long time, so a couple of years, will just, regardless of their password, be asked to reset it. And part of the motivation there is that we have some old passwords in the system that are still using the crypt library that is long known to be insecure, and we're going to remove support for that entirely. And I think.
Please confirm that you will not be forcing people to change their passwords regularly, though.
No, the idea is for this to be, if you don't log in for 3 years, then maybe you'll be
fair enough. But none of this 30-day nonsense that enterprises have mishandled. NIST, in fact, said, please don't do that.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Yeah. So the NIST suggestions we were discussing yesterday are something we're looking at, and specifically trying to avoid saying, oh, well, you have to have one character from each of the following 7 sets, and forcing everyone to choose from 3 passwords that comply.
Are there any plans to support 2FA or YubiKey or something like that for people?
Not immediately, but it is on the roadmap. We have later in the year, we hope to actually split authentication out of the data tracker and move to a different identity provider. Right now, we're expecting that will be the open source project called Authentic, and that will allow all of the modes that you just called out.
Yeah, and part of the motivation for doing this, enforcing this now, is just so that when we do transition to that system, so that we at least have a decent set of passwords there.
It will simplify that move. So if you didn't catch it, you'll note that there is a link to a relevant XKCD in that text. From there, you can follow to the NIST documents that Michael was calling out. Any other questions, comments on this? Nick, you want to talk about where we are in our production moves?
Sure. So we've moved all applications that don't rely on the shared NFS system onto a new cluster in Azure. So there's an updated diagram, a Miro board if you want to see it. Also, based on the feedback that we got on the last call, we look into self-hosting our Postgres database instead of using managed service. And we found that cloud native PG is the best option, and it will provide us with more performance and a lot of cost savings. So all the new database for the application that got moved into the Azure cluster are now running on cloud native PG. And staging will use a similar setup as well. So it should be more performance and cheaper.
Our current thinking for moving the set of applications that are still tied to that file system is, again, right after 123, in the period where IETF activity is at a lull. So If it turns out that we can make the transition super transparent before then, we'll consider doing so. But we want to, if it's going to involve any significant amount of downtime, we'll set it after that meeting. Pausing again for questions. Do remember that we're not using a queuing system, and if you do have questions, just jump in. Kasara, tell us what has happened with Zulip.
Zulip has been upgraded to 9.4. Previously, we were on 8.8 series, and the new changes. If you have been to new zulip.itf.org, you should have noticed that streams has been renamed to channels, and there are a bunch of other new changes which I have added a link to highlights of new changes. The Zulip project is already working on 11 series, and they have already released the 10 series. So I'm coordinating with MeetEcho to see whether we can move to Zulip 10, and Zulip 10 comes with another set of changes. I have added the link to the highlights there too. Any questions on that?
All right. So as I noted earlier, we've been working on the rewrite of IDNets. IDNets 3 is close to beta. The core work on the checkers is complete. We have some work that we want to do still on the way the command line interface presents its results. To make it a little more human accessible and instead of machine oriented. We've got a web interface already deployed at Author Tools. It currently doesn't have all of the features available because it doesn't have the parts that would reach out to the data tracker to see if the versions of the references are current. For instance, implemented yet. We encourage people to start seriously complaining, using it and entering issues if it's doing something that they think isn't right. We'll send out a formal request for people to do this when we have a beta release available, which we think will happen in the next couple of weeks. And at that point, there are still some checks that are anachronistic that we carried over from IDNets 2 because the initial project was the IDNets 2 re-implementation. We'll start trying to remove some of those checks, and feedback should include, hey, why are you still complaining about non-ASCII characters, for example, although I think that this thing will still point to non-ASCII characters for the RPC so that they can inspect the use. But there are other anachronisms from IDNets 2 that we know that we want to change for IDNets 3 going forward. The nice thing about this re-implementation is it was built using test-driven development, so making changes like that will be much easier than it was in the original set of IDNets 2 sed scripts. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
So comment on the non-ASCII check. It would be great if it just warns, because sometimes people copy text in, they don't realize they've, put non-ASCII characters in their documents. So just, letting people know, oh, you've got smart quotes, or you've got something maybe you should look at, because sometimes they weren't added on purpose.
Carson mentions in the notes that Cramdown RC has the eCares application to identify the non-ASCII info as well. All right, this is the end of the section where we intend to talk. The rest of what we've placed in the notes, we intend to be taken as read, but we have time if anyone has any questions about what you see in those sections, or if anyone who has put text into those sections has anything they want to call out in particular. Does anyone have any other business? Roland, if you have time later today, I'd like to finalize the one PR that I've got outstanding on the dashboard already. Will you have time to iterate on that?
Not until about after this call until 5 o'clock Eastern, so 4 your time.
Okay.
Or maybe a little later than that. Yep.
All right.
I'll hit you up.
Thank you. Anyone have anything else? Thanks again for everyone to take the time to participate in these calls. And if you have anything that you would like to suggest for what we can do to make the calls more effective for you, please let us know. I'll be entering the sessions for the next set of calls from now through just after IETF 123, either later today or sometime tomorrow. I will check at that point if there are any that we need to move around because of landing too close to 123 or not. And I'll start discussions on tools discuss if they do need to move. No, thank you. I think that's the end of the call today, and we'll talk with you the next one of these, if not before.